can hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning, and thank you so much for giving this presentation to us.
Thank you for having us. Also, a special thanks to Asela Rekawa, who had asked me to give some of my views and share my perspectives. So I'm glad to do that. As some of you may know, I was born in Sri Lanka many years ago, and had the benefit of living abroad and in Singapore mainly, and it's quite a if you like, almost nostalgic moment for me, because it's the second national law conference that I've attended, and I'm really honored and privileged to be here. I've also got with me my colleague Jun Feng. He represents, for me at least, what the very critical generation of crypto adopters would be like. And so I think it's important to include them in any narrative and any discussion. And so I think those young lawyers out there, this is your space. And this is a very unique time in our history where a new generational asset is being really developed. And it's still it's just we are still at basement 7. So there's a lot of development ahead of us, and for those of you brave enough and courageous enough to put aside your intellectual arrogance and your fears, and not be confronted by the breadth and the width of this ecosystem, you will be duly rewarded. I mean, it's certainly been. I wasn't a visionary when I got into this space. Quite literally, I had a client who had asked me to set up a digital asset fund, and this was about 5 years ago. And he said, "Krish, you've got to do it yourself. You can't palm it off to the youngsters," as I was doing, because I wasn't a believer. Truth be told, I was more intellectually lazy about getting into it. And then the next thing you know, I was very blessed because I was paid to learn. And so, if I can do it, I'm 51 this year. I think anyone else can do it. I mean, maybe you want to share before we get into the because this is all about the community and the crypto as well. Maybe why don't you share your journey and how you got into it, Jun Feng?
Hi guys, I'm Jun Feng. I'm a legal analyst at Digital Insights. I got in this space maybe about a good 6 months back. I started in a crypto native blockchain VC, and from there I really learned that the best part about this space is that if you can do it, people will let you do it. So we are very used to very traditional hierarchies, especially in the legal society. We are bogged down by hierarchy and qualifications, and I think in this space, your talent can really shine because many people are out there giving you opportunities, and I was very attracted by that idea, and I've stayed ever since.
Oh, that's great. I mean, you're right. It's a level playing field, and there isn't a lawyer who's got like 20, 30, or 40 years experience. There's no one like that many years ahead of you, right? So it's something which I think you should seriously look into getting deeper knowledge in. Okay, so for our session, we've got about 15 odd minutes. From my experience, these sessions can sometimes be a bit dry, and so Jun Feng has very kindly agreed to enter into dialogue with me. I thought it would be more of an interactive session. So we'll run through some of the slides, so don't worry about taking notes. All of these slides will be available to you, and we'll just be interacting amongst ourselves, but run through the slides as well. Okay. Well, I've introduced myself. That's great. Next. Right. I think the previous speaker had done a very good job in explaining what blockchain is all about. And I would just look upon it. You don't necessarily need to understand the ins and outs of the technical aspects of blockchain, but just understand that if you take one thing away from blockchain, remember tokens, tokenization, and remember blockchain. So there are many things which have representation, which is digital, but the moment the base layer is a blockchain, then whatever you fractionalize or whatever you represent, whatever asset, whatever digital asset you represent on that blockchain layer is a token. And so you will hear a lot about non-fungible tokens. That's like the flavor of the month. But just leave it simple. Whenever there's blockchain, just remember there's tokens. Do you want to maybe tell us about the evolution of the internet?
Oh yes. So I was very blessed to start my life as a digital native because I had that process where all we did was like play our phones and we sort of look at our iPad and MacBook and all that. That's all we do. So I was born in like the Web 2.0. So Web 1.0 is remember like your AOL days. I mean I can't relate now, but basically it's when you could read things off the internet like you would from a magazine, and you weren't allowed to interact with it. And then came Web 2.0 when you're allowed to type like on Facebook or Twitter and recently TikTok, when you're allowed to interact and like, comment, share your views as well. And so we come to Web 3, which is the next iteration, which is every user gets to own a bit of the network. Just like how Google, Facebook, these big technological giants, they own the bulk of the internet because at the end of the day, you have through search engines, social media, they form that narrative where what you do is dictated largely by them, even if you're not really aware of it.
Right. So it's almost like we have evolved. Web 2 has evolved from a platform economy. It's almost a reversion to a peer-to-peer economy, but this time round, these peers are creators. So everyone is a creator, right? So there's an interactivity on Web 3.0 because it's something that everyone will hear every now and then, will be thrown around. So Web 3.0 really is power to the people in that sense, and it's really sovereignty that you will have over your own data and being able to monetize it. So it's as they say, it's a creator economy now, and anyone's a creator. You don't have to be. I mean, I suck at art, but I understand I can be a creator as well because whatever content. I mean, right now I hope that's still recording. Battery is running low. But this could be content, right? So we are the creators of this content, and so Web 3.0 is really going to democratize our own assets and data.
But we get ownership over everything.
Yeah, exactly. Not that the platform guys want to hear this, but anyway. Right. So this is about layer 1 and layer 2. It's just terminology. I'm moving on, but it's effectively you have got. I mean, if we were to distinguish it, layer 1 should traditionally be a coin because that would be an infrastructure protocol, a blockchain infrastructure protocol, which will then sprout, if you like, give birth to tokens. So that's the strict nomenclature distinction between a coin and a token. It's used interchangeably. To all the lawyers out there, our world is about the words. There are no two similar words in the same words in meaning in the English language. There must be a reason why they are different. So make an effort to understand the nuances. Earn your keep. So that's the layer 1, layer 2 distinction, at least for now. And I'm sure as you get onto this journey of understanding a lot more of blockchain, you will see why this is important. Right. We've spoken a lot about a couple of the projects that we are involved in, and what is it about these uninitiated communities that requires attention?
I think generally for vulnerable communities all over the world, who don't really understand blockchain, these are the people that blockchain was meant to help in the first place. He wanted, whoever invented this technology, wanted for the community to benefit from it in a way that large corporations now benefit from it. So it's really giving the control, the ownership, the power back to these communities. And often many people think that these socially vulnerable, poverty-stricken communities, they have very true. But blockchain can be used to garner a lot of help because you don't need large corporations to give plenty of donations. You just need a few dollars from everyone on the street. Everyone is extremely sympathetic. We just don't have the bank account required to finance these initiatives. But now with blockchain we can, which is why I think it's very important for us to get the uninitiated community initiated.
That's a great point. And I mean, if you go back to the genesis of blockchain and Satoshi and his crew, so to speak, what drove them to really? I mean, it is a genius of a mathematical formula, and ordinarily you wouldn't have that type of intellectual brain power focused on a cause without any monetary gain, without any profit in sight, right? So it was really their Main Street against Wall Street narrative, and we are reaping the benefits of that. Now, when you look at the uninitiated community as you described, for me it kind of reminds me of how we have progressed from the early days when, particularly in the 80s, if you had a stockbroking account, you were one of the privileged few, right? So it's almost like the wolves of Wall Street from those days, right? It was confined to just a certain communities. The rich got richer.
Yes.
And then if you fast forward to Robinhood and some of the applications that make it so easy for anyone who is interested in understanding the public securities markets to actually participate. So it's that philosophy in mind that instead of making the mistakes of the past where it just got trickled down to everyone eventually, I think this really calls for a concerted effort for all uninitiated communities. And as you very correctly pointed out, blockchain was really designed for Main Street. But let's just hope that Wall Street is important. Don't get me wrong, because there's always a commercial narrative that drives growth and adoption. But I think here's where a lot of the jurisdictions and countries can play their part, which is to ensure that in parallel we embrace and adopt communities. And certainly in the projects that we are doing, that's a very important narrative, and we almost insist on that.
Yeah.
And so we also then come to Sri Lanka. It's an amazing country, not that I'm biased or prejudiced in any way. It's got wonderful people, very intelligent bunch as well. Always looked upon as, particularly in the 50s and 60s, and Singapore is taking a lot of leads from the Sri Lankan community. They were the flag bearers of civil service and all of that. And so why do I say that? Because I think it's important to realize that Sri Lanka has, in a way, perhaps not optimized its talent pool. Obviously, there was a lot of challenges in the last few years, last few decades rather. But in a perverse way, they kind of miss that. They can avoid that whole analog phase and jump straight into digital, if you know what I mean. It's like, it reminds me a bit of Myanmar when they were locked in, frozen in time, if you like. Because right now what we are seeing in blockchain is a lot has happened over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But a lot of scams have happened, a lot of developments have happened. And if Sri Lanka gets its cards right and plays its cards right, I think it can navigate very skillfully what to avoid from other countries' experiences, and also take a leaf out of the maybe the Singaporean book. Not that we are biased about that as well, but I think Singapore has got it really spot on. I mean, we'll discuss that later, but I just wanted to mention that for Sri Lanka, particularly the port city, it's a massive project, and I can think that they could do in parallel to that physical, like a metaverse universe as well, right? So in one fell swoop, as they're developing that whole and rolling out that entire city, you can see a parallel strategy where the metaverse, which incorporates virtual reality, augmented reality. You've got Microsoft's Mesh, which supports the infrastructure on that,
Yep.
and everything else. I think it's exciting times. Right. What's your observation, Chintan, about the dominant parties in the space? And who are they? What are the whales, by the way?
I think, okay, so firstly, whales are a term that crypto natives term as like the big players with a lot of wealth, and not the kind that you imagine, not some big Wall Street broker, but possibly someone just on the street selling NFTs, or someone who got lucky buying Bitcoin early, right? So these are called whales, people with huge pockets basically in the crypto space. And as Krishna rightly pointed out, there's a lot of risk, a lot of volatility. So you can imagine if there are a lot of losers and there are only a few winners, these winners will be big winners.
Sure.
So, and I feel like a place like Sri Lanka could really have an environment where these whales, who are always forum shopping by the way, they're always looking for lesser regulatory burden, better use of their assets instead of just keeping it in their pockets, and an environment where the digital meets the physical. And I feel like Sri Lanka has a lot of potential to be that space. And the returns are huge because these people are real big spenders. Yeah, they have real big pockets. So I think this could really jive well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mentioned the port city earlier, and it being a free trade zone as well, and we've got the example in that other matter we were assisting on in the Philippines, where they are creating these trade zones, these attractive free trade zones, which would at some point have a different sort of community, and at the same time, countries can still maintain the sanctity of an overall regulated strategy, but carve out zones, right? I mean, I think unfortunately Singapore is just far too small. It's if you have been to Singapore, it's a wonderful country. What we lack in size, we make up for in intellect, and so I think that's another strategy for Sri Lanka as well. Yeah, so I think it's part of that whole uninitiated, it's a vulnerable communities, because so what Digital Insights does is we look at providing advisory and consultancy services for agencies, government agencies, for corporates and even entrepreneurs who are looking into the space, and almost as a narrative and a philosophy, we impose a almost a requirement for the vulnerable communities to be part of this game, to be part of this community, because I think what everyone needs to get is, it's almost like that African concept of Ubuntu. It's the community as a whole has to rise. You leave no one behind. For those football fans, I'm a Liverpool fan, and you never walk alone. Right? But I think that concept is very important because it will not work if everyone in the community isn't rising up at the same time. And so I think if you are in a position of influence, and as fortunately as we are with Digital Insights, we try and push that narrative. And it's the same as well about the ESG. This is a very interesting project that we've been fortunate enough to be involved in, because the way I look at it, you've got the old world, and I kind of belong to the old world, if you like, the fuddy-duddies, right? And you've got the new world, right? And whilst there is an exuberance and an energy right now with the new world, the reality is the old world still controls the narrative. It still does, right? Because the old world still controls the levers that either prints the money or destroys the money, or produces and creates the opportunities, and it's going to be a while before we actually get adoption, because we are literally at the tip of that iceberg, and so it's important that, like, this project's I think this project is pretty neat because it gets the narrative of the crypto narrative, like tokenization, allows the listed companies and the corporates to dip their toes into this ecosystem, but at the same time, satisfying whether it's a CSR or an ESG or a UNSDG principle 1 to 17, whichever they fall under. So it's a win-win situation, and I think these are strategies that Sri Lanka as well could look into, because you have got to embrace all the communities, and I would say the old timers are particularly important.
Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Right.
Yeah, and so that's more about that project. I think yeah. Next, maybe we can. Right. This is your world. You Zoomers, I'm not gonna pretend as if I know what you guys are up to, but tell me more about what Vibe is all about.
I think in the crypto space, it's dominated by youths nowadays because, well, we don't have 9 to 5 jobs. We don't have jobs that take up many, many hours of our time. So we could venture into this space. And that's how it started in the beginning. People were learning about it, buying Bitcoin, Ethereum, all these coins, all these tokens rather.
You still have Bitcoins?
No. So, no. But in this space, because this space moves so quickly that the space is no longer what it was 6 months ago. So whatever I learned from 6 months till now, it's probably like a good 50% gone. And with this experience or with this kind of enthusiasm, that's really what you need to learn this space. Because the barriers to entry in this space isn't really money. You can take $5 and put it into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But the hurdle is, I guess, that intelligent arrogance that he was talking about. You need to come down to a point where I know nothing. This is a new system, it's the new internet, and let me try. And so I think the youth, we have nothing to lose, see. So we are trying. And I think one of the bigger pillars of what we see emerging is self-expression. So nowadays, there are plenty of people doing all sorts of things, and for example, NFTs, people are expressing themselves in every way possible, knowing that this is unique and they will have a piece to play in history. So Vibe was a project that we are all very passionate about because we wanted to let people express themselves in the freest fashion possible. So now for NFTs, we are really at the tip, as you said, of the iceberg. And so visual representations of art is the first step. It is like what Bitcoin is to blockchain. So moving forward, we can use this to show emotions, and everyone's emotion is pretty much unique. Right? And this is what we stand for here.
Good. How are we doing on time, by the way? Am I? Yeah. Are we good on time?
It's Krishna Ramachandra, but I think it's over. We'll keep some time for the question and answer session.
Perfect.
We can get back.